Hi, I'm Anne-Marie Mediwake, and I'm here with Lindsey Deluce and Kelsey McEwen. Welcome to CTV Your Morning, the podcast.
This week, we're taking a look at U.S. President Donald Trump and tariffs, of course. What is the president's endgame, and what does it really mean to buy made in Canada?
And if your parents ever told you that they didn't have a favorite child, if you are a parent saying, no, I don't have one, well, science says maybe you do.
Thanks for joining us. And don't forget, you can always watch us live, CTV Your Morning, weekdays from 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern, 7 to 10 a.m. Atlantic on CTV CTV News Channel, and on your CTV News app.
So we're starting the podcast this week with, you guessed it, tariff talk.
Yeah, the news has been changing, it feels like hour by hour. And this conversation was recorded just after it was announced that those tariffs between the U.S. and Canada would be delayed for 30 days. But the push to tariffs has driven more Canadians to look to buy products that are made in Canada. But in reality, that can be easier said than done.
Yeah, so we wanted to break it all down for you. We brought on Fraser Johnson, supply chain expert with the Ivey Business School at Western University, to explain.
All right, now that everyone has started to do their research, they are finding out buying Canadian is not as straightforward as we had hoped. First of all, what does it mean to buy Canadian?
Well, the Canadian producers have labels, so they're the product of Canada, which means that the product has about 98% content or more in Canada. Then there's made in Canada, which means that at least 51% of the value added comes from Canada.
You know, on food, that seems more straightforward. Plus, the grocery stores are really helping us out with that. But when we look at other products, like beauty products, for example, their labels aren't as clear. So how can consumers tell if this is a Canadian product?
Well, they look for the label that says product of Canada, made in Canada. But, really, from a consumer standpoint, the purchases fall into one of three buckets. So first of all, it's not available in Canada. So that might be consumer electronics, for example, in terms of being made in Canada. You've got product that is available in Canada. So it might be certain food products on an annual basis, wine, clothing, furniture. And then there's products that are available some of the time. And an example of that would be fresh fruits and vegetables.
What about for things like clothing, Fraser? So when you're looking at something that might have been designed somewhere else or designed in Canada, made somewhere else, where do you fall on the lines of that?
Well, this is where consumers need to do their research because, we've got some great Canadian clothing brands like Canada Goose and Roots, for example. But, quite often these companies outsource production of their products to overseas companies. So you really have to check the label on the product when you're buying it. And sometimes you can do that in advance. There are online resources that consumers can use. So there's one website called madeinca.ca, for example, which can help consumers through that process of determining what is made in Canada and what comes from other parts of the world.
How difficult is it for Canadian businesses and manufacturers to build and create products fully made here in Canada?
It's very difficult. It's difficult to pivot and disentangle supply chains that have been set up literally for the last several decades, just because of, will probably be a short-term event in terms of the trade dispute with the U.S. The difficult part of this is that Canadian businesses looking to expand in terms of buying capital, increase production, put money into new product development, really don't have any clarity in terms of what the future looks like. So it makes it very difficult from a business planning perspective.
Listen, you would know this, and everybody knows this as well. Provincially, it is a lot easier just to ship things an hour south of the border than it is to go from Ontario to BC. But there are more calls now politically to reduce those interprovincial tariffs here in Canada. How much of a difference would that make to our economy to not be selling south, but to be selling east-west?
Yeah, the opportunities that I read in the various reports are, between 3 to 4% bump up in our GDP. And really, the trade dispute with the U.S. is independent of the interprovincial trade barriers. And I've long argued that, we need leadership at the federal, provincial levels to be able to resolve these issues and make the country more competitive internationally.
I want to ask you quickly about big chains, because things like fast food, for example, while a company like McDonald's might not be Canadian owned, they do use either Canadian potatoes or Canadian beef. So what can consumers do in a situation like that?
Yeah, those are a little trickier, and I think that part of the process here is to take a look for substitutes. So if you're used to getting up in the morning and having a glass of Florida orange juice, and maybe you can look at apple juice as a possible alternative, apple juice which is made in Canada. But the reality here, Anne-Marie, is that which we should really talk about just quickly, is the financial implications of these decisions. Sometimes Canadian-made products are more expensive, and Canadians have been through a period, the last 4 or 5 years, where we've had tremendous food inflation, and a lot of people are just worried about putting food on the table for their families.
Well, that's exactly it. And a lot of those Canadian name brands are expensive brands, and we're in an affordability crisis. Groceries are already too expensive for most families. They're skipping meals. Fraser Johnson, great to have you with us this morning. Lots to think about and research, so thanks for helping us do that.
Thanks for having me on.
U.S. President Donald Trump's new policy on gender, it's raising concerns for trans and non-binary Canadians when it comes to travel. This morning, we're checking in with one of our globe-trotting guests for a look at how to stay safe while traveling. Miles Sexton has a long list of destinations that include India, Belize, Costa Rica, the Galapagos Islands, which, by the way, is what you're looking at right now. This looks so fun. Miles is joining us with their safety tips as a 2S LGBTQ plus advocate. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
That looked amazing.
Oh, this was amazing.
I know. Okay, so we're going to get to some of these safe destinations for people to travel to, but I really was curious about your reaction to Donald Trump's, executive order declaring there are only 2 genders. What went through your mind when you heard that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just really disappointing because I think it really denies the history of gender diversity. Even if we're just looking at Indigenous communities that were the founding people of our our nations, and then to how we have terms now for non-binary and trans within our cultures. It's just it's totally just denying these existence of these people that have been around since time immemorial. So it's just really sad that he's taking this path.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about how people can stay safe while they're traveling. You've got some good tips for everybody.
Yes.
So many people who have chosen to put an X on their passport,
yes,
they're scared to travel
totally
right now, right? So you are going to highlight some places to travel that are more accepting. So where would you recommend?
Absolutely. And as someone who is non-binary as well, I unfortunately didn't feel safe enough to put an X on my passport because I travel so much and for situations like this. So I've really had to kind of go through the route of, even though I am more feminine presenting, when I'm choosing these different countries, I was okay, where am I going to be safe? So when I've gone to India, I couldn't believe they were so inclusive when I was there. When I went to Ecuador, and when I went to Belize and Guatemala, these were all really great places. Costa Rica. What I think is really cool too with India specifically is that they do have a third gender category in their society called the Hijra, which would be very similar to trans or non-binary people as well. So yeah, it was pretty cool to see.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So I travel a lot with G Adventures. I really love group travel because I think safety in numbers and when you're in those situations, and G Adventures does such a good way of curating the training for the people that you're working with. So as soon as you go in, you have these sort of conversations and you feel safe, with them, whether you're a woman, whether you're someone from the community. So it's been great. A lot of these trips I've done through them.
The tour groups.
Yeah, and
so
we travel with a small
that.
group. So with G, I think the max is 12 or 15 people. So
and from all over?
All over the world,
that's
which
fun
is really
too.
cool. And you're all I feel like-minded people who want to travel and see the world. So it's you feel really safe. And they have different formats with their travels, their travel types too. They just launched a total single women's travel groups, which is really cool. So
you also recommend queer travelers in particular do their research.
Yes.
What do you mean by that? What does that look like?
I mean, I think it's important when you're going into a new country, to look up the laws, just to know what your rights are, what could happen, but also just to find spaces, whether in what cities that you're going to where you could feel safe. And this could also go for women. There's a really cool app that's called Everywhere is Queer, where you can go on the app and you can actually look up the city that you're in, and you can see all of the safe spaces that are available in that city, whether they're queer-owned businesses or just again allies. So safe for everyone. It's such a cool app to use when you're traveling.
What's the app again?
Everywhere is Queer.
Everywhere is Queer. You can see that on your screen. Miles, great to see you as always.
So nice to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to see you.
The new border security measures that we put in place are giving our country and Mexico a little bit of breathing room, at least for now when it comes to tariffs.
But from the border to banks to a general cry of unfairness, U.S. President Donald Trump's reason for applying the tariffs has taken several forms, raising the question I think a lot of us are asking, what is the real motive?
Yeah, what's the end game, right? Ian Lee is an associate professor at Carleton University. We always love it when he's on.
Yes.
Here's his take.
What the Trump, contrary to what our leaders have said, both federally and provincially in our country, that says he doesn't have a vision, he doesn't know what he's doing, he doesn't understand tariffs. I'm not here to defend Donald Trump. I don't agree with tariffs. I've been opposed to tariffs for my life, but it's not about me. It's about what's going on in his head,
right,
and what is his vision. And so this vision is audacious. It is radical, in my judgment. It is nothing less than the reform of the entire international economic system that has governed the world since 1945, variously called the Bretton Woods financial system, often just simply called multilateralism. Countries are all equal, one country, one vote at the UN, the IMF, and so forth, and we all obey the rules. Well, and he argues, Stephen Marin, and I believe he is speaking on behalf of Donald Trump, that the U.S. believes that they have been taken advantage of over the last 70-odd years by friend and foe alike, by countries demanding and getting full access to the U.S. economy, but then they protect parts of their own economy. And so they intend to use tariffs to force countries to open up those segments of their economies that are protected from American corporations.
So that's what we're seeing then. I like this phrasing of friend and foe, because a lot of people in Canada have said, this makes no sense. Why do this? We are your closest trading partner. What does that look like then? If that is the goal, for him to change that internationally, what does it, can he do that? He's one man, one country. Can he do that?
Well, that's the excellent question. And what the argument in the paper is, look, everybody around the world, or almost everybody, wants access to the American market because it's the largest, most powerful, innovative economy in the world, 25, 28 trillion, depending on how you measure it. No other country, including China, comes close to the U.S. So the fact that everyone wants access to sell into the American market is their card, their trump card, pardon the pun.
Yeah.
That's their lever. And so what they're saying is that if you want access to the American market, this is what you've got to do. In fact, there's a quote in the paper, Anne-Marie. It just jumped off the page. It's a quote by Marin of President Trump. He said, "It is not a right of foreign corporations to go into the United States and compete. It is a privilege that must be earned." Now, this contradicts all the trade agreements. That is not what it is said in the NAFTA agreement or CUSMA or the WTO. Yeah. So he is rewriting the rules, and he can get away with it because they are the largest economy in the world.
If this is the end game and that is the playbook, that's the blueprint, how do we negotiate that?
Well, first off, we have to know that there is this blueprint, and I've suggested repeatedly that up until probably this week, there was no indication from our national leaders or our provincial premiers that there was even this blueprint, this plan that they were pursuing. So now the first thing is, Tom Brady taught us he won all those Super Bowls because he came in before everybody else and started studying videotape of the competitors, and he did that day in and day out for his entire career. You've got to know what the other side is up to. You have to do opposition research. And so we have to do, we're now learning very belatedly what the U.S. government is up to. We've got to do a better job. Anne-Marie, there's one other point I want to bring out I didn't make explicit. Trump has augmented the list of irritants that have been in the U.S. Trade Reps report tabled in Congress since the Clinton years.
Right.
He's added to that list by saying, I want the digital digital tax on U.S. giants to be rescinded.
Yes, yeah.
And he's added security to the mix, saying, I want the borders. You countries that are accessing our market are not contributing your fair share. Yeah. And so that's going to be part of their calculus. Their demands on countries like Canada not only remove protected industries so American companies can go into those markets, but it's also to ensure that these countries are paying their fair share of defense, because they argue that they've paid the overwhelming share of the trillions spent since 1945 on international security.
Meanwhile, tariff concerns are forcing our political leaders in Canada to take a closer look at our own internal trade barriers.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of conversation about why we don't have free trade within the provinces right here in our own country. So we brought on Mark Manger, professor of political economy at the Monk School with the University of Toronto, to break it all down.
When we are talking about barriers within our own country, we're not talking about tariffs. We're talking about restrictions. What purpose do those restrictions serve?
So in many cases, they are actually professional restrictions. That's the most common one. And what it means is that when you want to work in a different province from the one where you're registered with your profession, then that becomes very difficult, and you usually have to get some kind of relicensing. And this extends to a lot of surprising number of professions across the country. It goes from some skilled trades, which is really very striking, to things like nurses. Many lawyers cannot work in different provinces, and all of this really hinders the mobility of people who want to offer their services across the whole country.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense because those are all areas that are governed provincially. Talking about healthcare, education, alcohol, all of that is out of the federal government hands and within the province. So Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, and you've probably seen this ad, he's calling on Ottawa to drop the interprovincial barriers. He's got this new ad out where he points out the difficulties of trading within our own country. I'm going to play it first for our viewers, and then you and I will chat about it.
But don't we already have free trade with ourselves? Nope. It's actually easier for our businesses to sell to other countries than to other Canadian provinces. Trade barriers.
So why is it so difficult for Canadian businesses to trade between provinces?
Well, in many cases, the reason is simply that these things, as you already said, are provincially regulated, and that we don't have a federal regulator to enforce the same rules across the whole country. But for that same reason, it's also not really up to Ottawa to just decide to drop these barriers. In fact, what's required is a very difficult and probably protected negotiation among all the provincial governments that are still maintaining these regulatory barriers. They have to come to the table and they have to agree that they will, at a minimum, mutually recognize their rules. And this is been talked about for decades. So it's not really I mean, it would be great to do. It would be fantastic to do, but it's not something that is a short-term solution to addressing our problems with our relations with our southern neighbor that we have at this moment. And it's not going to be something that any federal government could just implement, although it really should be kicked off.
Yeah, okay, so you're saying it should happen, and Anand is saying it's an extra $200 billion in the Canadian economy. The provinces seem to think this is a good idea. So what would it take to remove the barriers?
Well, the provinces think it's a good idea until it actually comes to the concrete examples, right? Because there are two kinds. So small businesses in general don't like these barriers, but they are very deeply bureaucratically entrenched. So a simple example is worker compensation boards. There are many of them, and you cannot really work across a provincial boundary if you are basically registered under a different worker compensation board. And provinces don't like to easily give up this regulatory authority. Otherwise, they would have agreed to this long ago, because there's a lot of rules. It takes time, and there are also bureaucrats, civil servants involved in administering these rules. So that's really somewhat difficult. And then you still have to agree on what the rules are going to be when they uniform.
Yes, and so, for Quebec would have to concede, or Ontario would have to concede for something for BC and vice versa. I hear what you're saying. I also hear what you're saying, that the provinces in this country have fought for a long time to keep sort of Ottawa out of their business. However, we do have the example of COVID in the pandemic, where the government stepped in and healthcare all of a sudden became federally regulated. It feels like in a crisis situation, we can make hard things happen. Could the tariffs, be the crisis that we need to get interprovincial trade barriers removed?
One would hope so, yes. The reason why this was doable under COVID was because the federal government could actually just declare an emergency in many cases, right, for these. But this should really give us the impetus to finally get this done. And these negotiations have been ongoing for a long time. The targets are pretty clear. What it really requires is interprovincial negotiations, and we know those are difficult and time-consuming.
Thanks for tuning in to Your Morning, the podcast. Every week, we bring you some of the most interesting conversations from the show on a wide variety of topics. Of course, you can always join us live weekdays 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern, 7 to 10 a.m. Atlantic on CTV CTV News Channel, or on your CTV News app.
Teaching kids how to ride a bike or play a sport, it's one thing, but what about when it comes to money? We could always start with a piggy bank, but our next guest says there are actually more effective ways to teach kids about money and how to be mindful of it. Personal finance expert David Delisle joins me more to tell us all about finances. Great to have you in.
So good to see you this morning, Kelsey.
So first up, how do you bring up the conversation of money with kids?
Yeah, so it's so much easier than we think. Simply just start talking about it. So when my guys were really little and they wanted something, I tell them how much it cost. But again, when they're really little, they don't understand that. So I tell them how much it cost in terms of chocolate bars and Lego sets. Because I have 2 little boys, that's what they understood. So a teddy bear might be 10 chocolate bars, something bigger might be 2 big Lego sets, and that's it. You can just start telling them how much things cost.
Working the cost into kind of everyday conversation.
Yeah, the same way we teach manners, where it's just incorporated. It's not a big, heavy lesson. We just talk about it as it comes up.
Okay, so David, what are some of the activities that we can do with kids to teach them about money?
Yeah, again, just incorporate it into your daily life. So if you're taking the kids to the movies, or if you're taking them swimming, or even to the fair, the money you plan on spending on them anyways, give it to them and let them do it. Like let them go pay for that, you know, the price to go swimming with their friends or buy a movie ticket or popcorn, and they just start understanding and can make some choices. Maybe they don't want to get the popcorn once they see how expensive it is.
Okay, and then when in this scenario, say the movies, how old do you picture that child is? Because while you might be able to hand like a 10-year-old a 20, are you doing the same thing with like a 3 and 4-year-old?
Yeah, I mean, a 3 and 4 might be a little tricky, but definitely like 5 or 7, if you're going swimming and you can give them, you know, the $5 in their hand and they go pay, they can do that at any age. If you're getting on, you know, the metro, you can give them the change and they can pay for it. Like kids love doing stuff. They get really excited when they have that empowerment and you enable them. So I would encourage almost any age, yeah.
Well, and you're almost killing 2 birds with 1 stone there, because not only are they dealing with the money, but also the social interaction of just having to like stand there and get change. Remember the first time I did that with my kids, they didn't know to wait and like put out their hand for the money that they were about to get back because they'd never done it before. Yeah,
and they'd just be confused with what comes in. And that's a great point too, because you remember a bit of the change. Most of these kids growing up, they've never even seen money. Like that's what's so crazy, because it's all digital. So we talk about the value of money, they don't even see those coins or those bills.
Yeah, an important reminder to make it much more tangible. David, what benefits come from giving kids the chance to make their own decisions around money?
So empowerment's a big one. I mean, that's huge, but most parents come to me and they're like, I wish my kids just understood the value of money. And they can't understand the value of money because they've never been taught it or had any opportunity to interact with it. So it really teaches them that value of money and sees how much things cost, and then through that can start making decisions, because that's the whole point, is, you know, making choices. And we talk about wanting kids to be, you know, grateful for what we give them and spend on them, but they have no idea, so they can't be. So this allows you to just enable your kids to be a little bit more familiar with money in general.
Yeah, I feel like it's a 2-part conversation where you not only talk about the gratitude, about being thankful for all that we have and the things that we've received, but then also applying that tangible number to it, the quantity to it, really kind of cements that lesson for them.
For sure. And then they can also make decisions. So we didn't talk too much about the decisions, but when they're doing that, they can start making choices. Oh, would I rather, you know, buy this instead of this? Or would I rather save it? Or maybe, you know, go swimming twice with, you know, instead of going to the movies. And,
For sure.
And they can start seeing that, so.
David, you've got so many great tips. You actually wrote a book about this called The Golden Question. In it, you talk about this philosophy called the awesome stuff. So what is this and how can it help kids?
So the awesome stuff is a bit of money mindfulness, which sounds a little bit crazy, but really it's just pausing before a purchase and asking, is this my awesome stuff? But where it gets really exciting and where it's different than what we've typically taught, we're used to teaching sacrifice. So you really want that ice cream, don't get it. And nobody likes that. So the awesome stuff is pausing to see if there's something you like even more. So maybe that same child realizes they want a teddy bear, not the ice cream. And then as parents and adults, maybe it's instead of doing the home renovation, we want a new vehicle, or the other way around. And I know, like for me, I look at everything in terms of like freedom to have time to travel with my boys. I love doing that. So it's not this sacrifice of don't get those things, it's what's really important to you. And again, as adults, you become more empowered and you don't have that lack and that sacrifice that we typically teach when we teach about money.
That's such a beautiful reframe from sacrifice to availability.
Yes.
I love that.
I love talking to kids about money.
Do you really?
Me
well,
too.
I love that we're talking to people about how to talk to kids about money because I think as adults, there's so many things we have to unlearn because we've either learned through experience or trial and error. But kids' brains, I say all the time, are so stretchy. Teach them now.
I know, and I've always been an advocate for financial literacy at a very early age. We're talking like 3, 4 years old. I mean, it's obviously age appropriate. But I want to see in kindergarten, I've talked about it on the show, I want to see in kindergarten you teaching like how to save money and like different buckets that you can put in. We actually, for our kids, we gave them 3 piggy banks essentially. So, and they're the fun ones where you put a coin in and it actually automates and it counts for you on the top and there's a little screen. We had one for short-term saving, one for long-term saving, and one for, donation, that type of thing. And just to start there and start really easy, because you know what, I've met adults in life, and I'm sure we all have, who didn't have conversations around money. Money was like off. It was a topic you did not discuss. And I find a lot of them now, like, will clam up. If you try to bring up anything to do with finances or money or saving, it is not a comfort zone. When you think about it and you make it more normal in the household, I feel like when you have those open conversations, you're gonna manage your money better. That's my opinion.
And I think also important to note, like my dad was an accountant.
That's
so we
right.
talked about money a lot. Right. And I have money issues. In terms of being comfortable talking about it. I get nervous talking about money. I don't like talking about it. And so it's forcing yourself to have those conversations, even if you've grown up in a house that is financially literate. I think the worry I always have with my kids is because we've caught ourselves with them where we've been talking about money and then all of a sudden they're feeling like we don't have enough.
Yeah.
Because we're
that's
saying,
fair.
oh, let's not spend our money on this. Or, oh, we can't afford that. And so I've followed a lot of great people who over the years have said, instead of saying things like, we can't afford that, it's, we're gonna choose to spend our money elsewhere. And sometimes, we all know, especially in this day and age, sometimes you can't afford it.
Right.
And that's okay, but putting that fear in kids can also be a challenge for them because then they grow up feeling like there's not enough. So then when they have money, they want to spend because they've never been able to.
Yeah.
So it's
What about those lessons? Did you guys learn the hard way?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I think we all did. Like, I remember my first credit card, and of course they like hand them out in university, right?
Yeah.
They want you to sign up with all of the incentives. First one, and I think my limit at the time was like $2,500. But I ran it up so much, meaning it was probably around $1,000. I couldn't pay off, I could only pay the interest. I was not paying any of the principal down. So I was stuck in this hole because I'd never had a credit card before, that I had to go to my parents, tail between my legs kind of moment, and say, I need your help to bill it. It was a really good lesson.
Yeah.
Probably not for them, but for me, in terms of like how it functions, right? I didn't know.
We had a really neat conversation with our kids when they were a little bit, sort of around 14 years old, with a financial planner. And we sort of told him, we said, would you take a portion of our time and speak with our kids about money? He said, I love doing this. And he told us something that I hadn't thought of. We gave our kids allowance to sort of manage some of the extra things so they weren't always coming to us. And he said, almost give them like a living wage. So it's more than an allowance, but they pay for extra shampoos or fancy shampoos that they want, or hair products, or their own haircuts out of that money. He said that's what teaches them how to budget, and that's what teaches them how much things cost, and then what you choose to have and what you don't choose to have. Rather than just you being like an ATM handing out like the play money, you actually demonstrate the living money.
That's
you know
so
what else
smart.
that taught our kids? Because we have boys and girls in our house, how much more expensive girls' things are.
Oh, for sure.
Yes.
Yes, and the girls are more social, so they had more friends and were paying for more birthday parties and things like that.
Yes. I buy a men's razor for that reason.
Oh,
Is it
so
cheaper?
annoying.
It's cheaper.
Yeah, it is cheaper.
I do buy men's too.
What's your take on, because I don't know what to do here, some parents give money for chores and some don't. And I've heard both experts on either side, I guess, say one is good and one is better than the other. What do you do?
We did responsibility. So you live in the house, it's your responsibility. Everybody pitches in.
And you don't get paid for it.
We didn't get paid for it. If there was something extra that I needed done, like, I don't know, some company's coming over and I wanted something extra, I wanted somebody to help me like to set up or something like that, then I would offer to give extra money or to clean out our cars. But then it had to be done weekly. There was a set of expectations around it.
It's a job.
But things like Mow the lawn, unload the dishwasher.
Make your bed.
We don't pay for any of that.
We're the same. We're the same. All of those responsibilities or those expectations, that is just what you do in a household when you're living with people.
Okay.
Or my roommates, as I call them. All right, moms and dads listening, let's be honest for a second. Do you have a favorite child?
Oh, you might say no, but a new study, it's science, suggests otherwise.
And I love this part. If you're the sibling who always suspected that mom and dad had a favorite, you're probably right, and it's probably exactly who you thought it was.
Now, your parents might have told you they never had a favorite child, but a new study shows they probably weren't telling the truth. Research published by the American Psychological Association found favoritism is not only a real thing, but it tends to follow certain patterns. Joining us with more this morning is Dan Riskin. He's CTV's science and technology specialist. First of all, Dan, where are you in the birth order?
I am the first of two. I have a brother and then I have a half sister. So it gets more complicated when you get in there because you got a mix of parents. But my mom is obsessed with making everything completely even so my brother and I can't tell who she loves more.
Oh, because you're all her favorite. What did researchers determine that most parents have a favorite child? How'd they figure this out?
Well, this is actually, it's a little bit more complex than a lot of the headlines are suggesting, because there's, if you ask the parents, what do they say? And then if you ask the kids, what do they say? And then there's also, if you don't ask the kids, but you ask each child about their childhood, and then you look at their answers to try to figure out if one of them got favoritism or not, you get a third kind of answer. And none of these come to the same conclusion. And so it turns out it's messy and it's complicated, and it's just like, life at home with kids. And so the headline that a lot of people are running away with is that the younger sibling gets favored over the others. But that's only true when you look at all the data at the same time. If you start to dig in, you find exactly the opposite showing up in other studies. And so it actually is quite complex. And the stakes from this are quite high, because what you believe in terms of whether your parents love you more or love you less than your siblings can have huge implications for your development.
Okay, the research also looked at more than 19,000 participants, and that's from the US, Canada, Western Europe. What trends or patterns did the team find around which child tends to be favored? Now, you mentioned that there's a lot of love for the youngest, but what else did they find?
Yeah, I mean, they found a lot of love. So if you look at all the studies together, you find that it tends to favor the youngest. But then if you look at just moms, studies that had just moms, what you were asking, or studies where you ask both parents, you find that both parents tend to favor the older child, and the moms don't tend to have a favorite. And so you get the complete opposite result. Yeah, well, right. Moms, and a good mom shouldn't admit it, because one of the things about this study is that it's all put in the context of the fact that this is a major problem for a lot of people. So if you believe that your parents don't love you as much as you love your siblings, worse mental health throughout your life, more problem behaviors as a child, less academic success, worse self-regulation, and worse relationships as you go forward in your life. So the stakes are very high here, and this can be a major problem. And so that was the context in which it was done, trying to understand what's causing these kinds of dysregularities to happen that have such negative impacts for the kid who believes that they're not loved as much.
So while parents may not be able to control whether or not they have a favorite child, or that child feels like they're the favorite or not, what do we know about the psychological impact that favoritism can have on siblings?
Yeah, so it can cause all kinds of problems. It can create problems in the relationships between the siblings, which extend well beyond when they've grown up and left the house, of course. When you've got that chip on your shoulder that mom always loved you more, it just plays out in all the Hollywood movies and lots of Succession, all the different dramas that are so tied into who did mommy or daddy love most. These things have far long-reaching effects. And so what researchers are really trying to get to is trying to understand how to make this effect go away and how to help parents avoid creating that impression in their kids. Because really, when it all boils down, there isn't a clear pattern that younger kids are loved more or girls are loved more, or that there are personality types among kids that cause the parents to love them more or less. Really, it just comes down to your impression.
All right, taking showers is part of everybody. I mean, let's hope it's part of everybody's routine. No judgment. But how you take them can be divisive. So this TikTok user is sharing her thoughts, first of all, whether or not you should shower at night or in the morning.
Why is this even a debate? It's either you take a shower morning and night or just night. How the do you only take a morning shower and then you go to school, you go to work for 8 hours, let's say you maybe go hang out with your friends as well, you gonna come back to your house sweaty, dirty from the outside, take off your clothes and just get into bed? Me, I just take showers at night because I wake up clean. I don't, and then I go on about my day, and then at night you wash all the dirt and grease off from the day. Like, why is this even a discussion? Like, it's either morning and night or just night. If you only take morning showers.
Yeah. I hear what she's saying.
You do?
Do you really?
Yeah, well, I hear what she's saying. There are people who have a thing about like wearing the day. Like there are people who will fully change like their clothes and everything because they don't want to bring the day into their house and all the things they come into contact with. So she's saying, end the day clean, you wake up clean, then carry on your day, and then wash it all off at night. So you're starting the clean routine before you get into bed.
But
Wait, we've got a WhatsApp question. Should we show it to him?
Oh yeah, we should definitely do that.
Yeah, do you shower? It's very simple. Do you shower in the evening or the morning? Here's the QR code. Let us know.
I don't live a life where I
Can you shower in the morning?
No, well, obviously with this schedule, I did this morning, and that was really, really weird.
Did?
I did. I even blow dried my hair this morning.
Wait, what?
Whoa.
How
It
much
was weird.
earlier did you have to wake up?
Well, I was already up because I went to the gym.
Wait, what?
Sorry.
Kelsey.
You went to the gym before you
The
got
gym's
here?
in my backyard. It's fine.
Kelsey,
I know.
calm down.
No, listen. It's like
that stresses me out so much. Like you have no sleep in you.
No, I know, but that reduces my stress level because I don't have a life right now and a schedule.
You went to the gym. You showered and blew dry your hair.
Yeah, well, it was mostly dry because it dried on the hour drive.
And then you drive for an hour.
I know.
Were you up at midnight?
Yes, pretty much. But listen,
Sorry.
I don't have a life where I can always dictate when I shower. Like I don't know if anyone else is in this season of their life. No, I have to finish the sentence.
Finish. I'm just trying to imagine a life where you make the choice to get out of your bed, walk to your backyard in the cold,
Yes.
work out.
Yeah, I did. I did glutes and hamstrings this morning. It was great. I'm done now.
God love you.
I know.
Man, I can't even open my face right now. Like my entire face is swollen. I don't know. I woke up and I was like, I can't see. I still can't see. It was trouble reading the prompter this
Lindsey
morning.
looks at me, she's like, does my face look swollen? And I was like, no.
It does though. I can see it.
Okay.
Maybe I should have worked out my face today.
You should have done some glutes and abs.
Something.
Is what you should
anyway,
have done.
back to your shower.
I don't know that I want to talk about my shower with all the
We say this 'cause we're
acceptance I'm
impressed.
getting from the sofa over here.
I'm in shock.
Shock and awe.
I know. Anyway, the point being, I don't always get to pick when I have a shower, so when I have
amazing,
time, I
Kels.
do it. That's all I had to say.
That's amazing.
What do you do?
I switch it up. Listen, I have my showers down fast.
You do?
I don't wash my hair.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're fast.
I'm
think
at
6 minutes.
I do. 6 minutes?
Yeah, I'm in and out.
I do afternoon.
Oh.
I know. I'm throwing in the mix. But I think when you work shift work, hours we do, I don't want to. I don't like to do it at night because I don't want wet hair at night because then I have to dry it.
Yeah.
Then at least if I do it in the afternoon, I can let it dry.
Oh, that's fair.
Thanks.
See how nice I was in accepting of your life choices?
Well, because yours are
That's
just
because you've been awake for 12
insane.
hours already.
Thank you so much for being with us today.
For more great conversations, you can download or hit subscribe to Your Morning the podcast on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
And don't forget, watch us live weekday mornings on CTV CTV News Channel or on your CTV News app. Start your morning with us.